HTML forms. Forms are a part of everyday life. When we use a physical form in real life, we write down information and give it to someone to process. Think of the times you've had to fill out information for various applications like a job or a bank account, or dropped off a complete suggestion card. Each instance is a form. Just like a physical form, an HTML form element is responsible for collecting information to send somewhere else. Every time we browse the internet, we come into contact with many forms and we might not even realize it. There's a good chance that if you're typing into a text field or providing an input, the field that you're typing into is part of a form. In this lesson, we'll go over the structure and syntax of a form and the many elements that populate it. How a form works. We can think of the internet as a network of computers which send and receive information. Computers need a HTTP request to know how to communicate. The HTTP request instructs the receiving computer how to handle the incoming information. More information can be found in our article. The form element is a great tool for collecting information, but then we need to send the information somewhere else for processing. We need to supply the form element with both the location of where the form's information goes, HTTP request to make. Take a look at the example. Form action/example.html method post closing form element. In the above example, we've created the skeleton of a form that will send information to example.html as a post request. The action attribute determines where the information is sent. The method attribute is assigned to a HTTP verb that is included in the HTTP request. Note, HTTP verb like post do not need to be capitalized for the request to work, but it's done so out of convention. In the example above, we could have written method equals post, and it would still work. The form element can also contain child elements. For instance, it would be helpful to provide a header so that the users know what this form is about. We could also add a paragraph to provide even more detail. Let's see an example of this in code. The example above doesn't collect any user input, but we will do that in the next exercise. For now, let's practice making the foundation of an HTML form. So here you have form, action, example.html, method post, h1 creating a form, and the paragraph, and closing form element. Text input. The input element has a type attribute which determines how it renders on the web page and what kind of data it can accept. The first value of the type attribute we're going to explore is text. When we create an input element with type text, it renders a text field that users can type into. So here's an example. Form, input type text, name, first text field. So here in the exercise, we put input type text, name, username, value, Dave. Adding a label. The label element has an opening and closing tag and displays text that is written between the opening and closing tags. To associate a label and an input, the input needs an ID attribute. We then assign the for attribute of the label element with the value of the ID attribute of input like so. Label for meal, what do you want to eat? Break. Input type text, name food, ID meal. So the code above renders what do you want to eat and a text. What do you want to eat and a space for text. Now users know what the input element is for. Another benefit for using the label element is when this element is clicked. The corresponding input is highlighted, selected. Let's see the label element in action. So here in the exercise, add a label element that is associated with the included input element in index.html. Use the for attribute. Then add a text username within the label element. After clearing this checkpoint, click on the username label in the browser to see corresponding input field selected. So here it is, label for username. You would add input element, type password, name, user password, ID, user password. Input type number, name amount, ID amount. Step 1. In order to create this, you're going to use range. So input type range, minimum of 0, max of 5 in this case. Step 0.5. Checkbox input. For checkbox, you're going to add input type checkbox. ID in this case is bacon. Name topping. Value bacon. Here we have a section with the toppings class. Span what toppings would you like? Break. And we're going to add input type checkbox, ID lettuce, name topping, value lettuce. And you're going to label for lettuce, lettuce. And you're going to do the same thing for tomato and bacon. And this is how your checkbox is going to look like. Radio button input. So for radio button, you can only choose one option. So be yes or no. It would not be like the checkbox. And in order to do that, you're going to use type radio and the options label yes or no. Drop down list. So here you have what type of bun would you like, sesame, potato, right? And here's the section for bun type. You're gonna add the option element in order to create the drop down list. Data list input. You're going to use the data list element and the options inside. So here in the example, you have ketchup, mayo, mustard, and you need to create data list and add the options. Text area element, you're going to use opening and closing text area, and you're going to set how big that is by putting rows and columns. So in this case, it had 3 rows, 40 columns, and this is how it looks like. Submit form, you're going to add a class of submission, input, type submit, value submit, and closing tag. In this lesson, we went over the purpose of a form is to allow users to input information and send it. The form's action attribute determines where the form's information goes. The form's method attribute determines how the information is sent and processed. To add fields for users to input information, we use the input element and set the type attribute to a field of our choosing. Setting type to text creates a single row field to text input. Setting type to password creates a single row field that censors text input. Setting type number creates a row field to number input. Range creates a range of numbers. Checkbox creates checkbox that can be paired with other checkboxes. Radio can be paired with other radio buttons. List will pair with the input with a data list element if the ID of both are the same. Setting type to submit creates a submit button. A select element is populated with option elements and renders a drop-down list selection. A data list element is populated with option elements and works with an input to search through choices. A text area element is a text input field that has a customizable area. When a form is submitted, the name of the field that accepts input and the value of those fields are sent as name-value pairs. Using the form element, its conjunction with the other elements listed above allows us to create sites that take into consideration the wants and needs for our users. Take the opportunity to take what you've learned and apply it.